Montana Territory, July 1878. The punch hit her so hard she stumbled backward onto the dusty street, blood already spilling from her split lip. "Keep your mouth shut next time, whore," the man growled, stepping forward like he meant to hit her again. Before his foot landed, a boot caught him clean in the jaw. The crack echoed off every storefront and saloon wall. The man hit the ground, dazed, and a second later, his nose met a fist so hard it crunched under the blow. "She's got me now," the stranger said, standing over the man's crumpled form. "That's all you need." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. Jesser Rowan blinked up at him, dazed from pain and shock. She had not expected help, and certainly not from a man like this, tall, broad-shouldered, with a coat dusted in trail dirt and a revolver tied low on his thigh, as though he had just ridden in from nowhere. The man reached out a hand, not demanding, just offering. "You all right?" She took it. Her hand trembled in his, but her voice was steady. "I can stand." He helped her up gently like he knew she might fall again. "Name's Boone Ellard." "Jessa," she said, brushing grit from her skirt with her free hand. "Jesser Rowan." He glanced down at the unconscious man. "Who the hell was that?" "Just a man who drank too much and thought I owed him something because I said no." Boone looked at her. Really looked. "You sure you're all right?" Her lip was bleeding, her cheek already bruising, but her chin lifted. "I have had worse." Boone didn't like the sound of that, not at all. A sheriff finally came rushing from the other side of the street, half-buttoned and red-faced. "What in the hell's going on?" Boone turned to him, voice even. "This man hit her in the face." "I stopped him." The sheriff looked from the blood on Boone's knuckles to the man groaning in the dust. "You break his nose." "Yeah," Boone said, calm as ever, "and I'd do it again." The sheriff looked like he might argue, but then saw Jessa's face and deflated. "Jessa, you want to press charges?" "No," she said, and Boone caught the way her voice tightened. "Just get him off the street." The sheriff muttered something under his breath and hauled the man away. Jessa turned to go, but Boone followed. "Let me walk you. I am fine." "I believe you," he said, "but I am still walking you." She did not argue. They walked side by side down the dirt road, past the cracked windows of the general store and the faded sign of the boarding house. Boone kept his eyes forward, but every step he took was matched with hers. He had no idea who she was, just that he had seen her take a hit meant to silence her and stand right back up. He respected that. She stopped in front of a narrow, leaning building with peeling white paint and a crooked mailbox. "This is it." Boone nodded. "You live alone." "I do not see how that is any of your business." "I just meant," he said, "if that man comes looking again, I would rather not come back to find you bleeding." Her eyes softened, just a little. "I can handle myself." "I saw that," he said. "But if you ever need someone to stand with you, I would not mind." That made her pause. "Why?" she asked. Boone shrugged. "Maybe because you were the only person in that street who did not back down. Maybe because I do not like watching good women get hit. Maybe because I got no one else to fight for right now." Jessa looked at him, really looked. His face was rough from the trail, jaw dark with stubble, eyes shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. But there was something honest in his voice. Solid. She opened the door. "You hungry?" Boone blinked. "I could eat." "Then come in." He followed her inside. The place was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen that smelled of herbs and firewood. A girl's bonnet hung on a hook by the door. Boone glanced at it. "You got children?" Jessa washed her hands at the basin. "One, her name's Veta. She is 6. She's over at Mrs. Hensley's for the night. I did not want her around the saloon while I worked." Boone frowned. "You work in the saloon?" "I serve drinks, wipe the tables. That is all. But men think that means more than it does." He nodded, jaw tight. "That man from earlier was just the latest," she said. "But hopefully the last." Boone watched her move the way she winced when she lifted the pot from the stove. "Let me help." She handed him a spoon. "Stir that." They stood shoulder to shoulder by the stove, the silence between them steady, not strained. Boone added salt. Jessa chopped carrots. Her lip was still bleeding, but she smiled once when he tried to taste the stew and burned his mouth. After supper, she leaned against the kitchen wall, arms crossed. "You always go around punching strangers for women you do not know." Boone looked up from where he was drying the plates with a towel. "Only when they are worth it." Jessa tilted her head. "And you decided I am?" "I did." She stared at him, wary, curious. "You do not even know me." "I know enough. You took a hit and stayed standing. You are raising a child on your own. You let me in your home without flinching. That is more than enough for me." Jessa looked away. Her voice was quiet. "She was left with me. My sister died giving birth. I was 20, had nothing but this house. Veta was 3 days old. I raised her anyway." Boone's voice was soft. "You are a good woman." "No," she said. "I am a tired one." He stepped closer, not touching her, just closing the space gently. "Then let me help carry it." She looked up at him. Her eyes were tired but clear. "You do not even know what it is." "I do not need to." Outside, the wind shifted. A storm was coming. But inside, something steadier was building, slow, simple, real. Jessa reached up, touched the edge of the bruise on her cheek. "You stayed." "I did." "And you are not going to disappear tomorrow." Boone shook his head. "Not unless you tell me to." She stepped closer, just enough that her shoulder brushed his chest. "Then stay." "I will." Her voice dropped. "I do not need saving." Boone smiled just a little. "I am not here to save you, Jessa." "Then why?" He met her eyes. "Because you have got me now. That is all you need." Veta came home the next morning just after sunup, barefoot and dragging a brown scrap of cloth she called her rabbit. Boone stood by the window, lacing his boots, and saw her before Jessa did. She ran up the porch steps and through the door wide, hair tangled from sleep, eyes wide. "Mama, who's that?" Boone crouched to her level. "Name's Boone." Jessa stepped out of the small bedroom, tying her apron. "He helped me last night." "That's all." Veta looked at her mother's bruised cheek and then back at Boone. "Did you hit the bad man?" Boone nodded once. "I did." She gave him a long look, then held out her rabbit. "You can hold Mr. Henry if you want." He took it gingerly, as if it might fall apart in his hands. "That's kind of you." Jessa watched the exchange, arms folded. "Veta, go wash up. There's bread on the counter." The girl skipped off, rabbit retrieved, and Boone stood again. "She's bold," he said. "She had to be," Jessa answered. "Too many things in this world try to scare girls small." Boone didn't argue that. He picked up his hat from the table but didn't put it on. "I was thinking of heading out west of town. There's a rancher asking around for help mending fence lines. Could be a few weeks of work." Jessa wiped her hands on her apron. "You don't need my leave." "I'm not asking for it," he said. "I'm letting you know I'll be close." She didn't answer right away. Then, "You don't owe me anything, Boone." He stepped closer, but not too close. "It's not a debt. It's a choice." Veta came back with a hunk of bread in one hand and a green ribbon in the other. "Mama, can I tie my braid with this today?" Jessa nodded. "Go sit on the step. I'll do it in a minute." Boone opened the door for the girl, then turned back. "If you need anything at all, you send word. I'll come." Jessa looked down at her hands. "I don't take charity." "I'm not offering it." She glanced up. "Then what are you offering?" Boone's voice was quiet now. "A place to lean." "Not forever. Just if you get tired." She nodded once, just enough to be seen. Boone stepped outside. By mid-afternoon, he'd found the rancher, an older man missing 3 fingers on his left hand, and took to the south pasture with a post-hole digger and a roll of barbed wire. The work was hot and sharp, but it kept his mind from wandering too far. Still, by dusk, he found himself watching the road back toward town. Jessa, meanwhile, stood in the garden behind her house, mending Veda's dress by lantern light. Her cheek throbbed, but she didn't flinch. She thought of Boone's hands, the way they'd held the spoon, careful and steady. She thought of the way he'd looked at Veda, not like she was a burden, but like she mattered. That night, she checked the locks twice before bed, not out of fear but habit. Then, after Veda had curled against her in sleep, she reached for the window latch and opened it a crack. The wind brought in the scent of pine and horses and the faintest trace of smoke. Somewhere out there, Boone was sleeping under stars or in a barn, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel entirely alone in the world. The next morning, she found a sack of dried apples hanging from her gate post. There was no note and no footprints on the walk. She looked down the empty road, then turned, smiling just faintly as she tucked the fruit into her apron. The wind shifted east on the fourth day. Dust curled off the fence lines like breath from a tired horse, and Boone worked with his sleeves rolled high, sweat darkening his collar. He hadn't been back to town, but he'd taken to watching the ridge above the river every evening as if the shape of her might appear there, walking in the dying light. She never did. That afternoon, while hammering in a stubborn post near the creek bed, a boy rode up on a small chestnut mare. He couldn't have been more than 11, his hat too big and his boots dusty with road miles. "You Boone Ellard?" the boy asked, holding out a folded scrap of paper without waiting for an answer. Boone wiped his hands on the thigh of his trousers before taking it. The boy didn't linger. By the time Boone unfolded the message, the pony was already trotting back toward town. The writing was crooked but clear. "Veda's taken fever. I won't ask, but I'll leave the door unlatched." Boone didn't stop to gather his things. He saddled his gelding and rode hard, the sun already low behind the hills and the sky edged orange with the coming dusk. When he reached the house, he didn't knock. The door gave under his hand, just like she said. Inside, the air was damp with heat and the scent of vinegar and boiled cloth. Jessa sat on the floor beside the cot, Veda's hair plastered to her forehead, her small frame cocooned in quilts. Boone closed the door behind him, quiet as a prayer. "She's cooler than she was this morning," Jessa said without looking up. "But it's not broke yet." He lowered himself beside her, knees creaking. "You need anything?" "I need the fever to break before morning." Her voice was brittle. "And I need her to stop shaking like that." Boone reached out, his hand brushing the girl's ankle. "She's strong, she's small. I've seen small things survive worse." Jessa looked at him then, eyes ringed with fatigue. "You ever had a child burn up in your arms?" "No," he said. "But I've sat with dying men who called for their mothers. That kind of fear don't leave you." Jessa looked back to Veda. "She's all I've got." Boone didn't answer, only unfolded a clean rag from his pocket and dipped it into the basin beside the bed. He squeezed it out and laid it over Veda's wrist, the motion practiced and gentle. They worked in silence, changing cloths, coaxing sips of water, whispering when she stirred. When midnight came and went without change, Boone fixed a kettle on the stove while Jessa leaned her forehead to the wall. "Have you always lived in this town?" he asked, voice soft so as not to wake the girl. "No," she said. "We came here when Veda was 2. Before that, we stayed near Deer Lodge." "Why'd you leave?" "My sister got sick. We came looking for help. She died on the road." "I stayed because I didn't know where else to go." Boone poured hot water over the herbs she'd laid out earlier. "My mother died in childbirth, raised by my father's sister in Nebraska. She didn't want the job and made sure I knew it." Jessa turned her head to look at him. "And yet you're here now, helping someone else's child." "She's yours," Boone said. "That's enough." The fire cracked low. Veda stirred and groaned, her face red with heat. Boone leaned in, but Jessa was there first, lifting her gently, pressing a cool cloth to the back of her neck. Then, without warning, Veta exhaled a long breath and went still, not limp, just quiet. Her breathing settled into something slower, deeper. Jessa froze. Boone touched her shoulder. "That's it," he said. "That's the break." Jessa didn't speak. She only clutched her niece to her chest, rocking slightly. When Veta slipped back into sleep, cool now, Boone walked outside to give Jessa space. He stood on the porch and looked out over the quiet road, the sky painted pale with the edge of dawn. Jessa joined him not long after, arms wrapped around herself, her hair come loose at the ends. "I didn't think she'd make it through," she said. "She did." She hesitated. "You didn't have to come, I know. But you did." Boone looked over at her, the faintest light catching the bruise still fading on her cheek. "You left the door open." Jessa rested her hands on the porch rail. "I didn't expect this when I met you." "What did you expect?" A stranger with a fast temper and a sharp jaw. Boone half laughed. "That's not wrong. But I didn't expect you'd still be here after 4 days. I don't leave unless I'm told to." Jessa didn't answer right away. The wind stirred the hem of her nightdress. Then she said, quiet but certain, "I'm not telling you to leave." Boone looked at her. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He reached for her hand, slow. She didn't pull away. Inside, Veta slept, the fever broken. Outside, the sun lifted above the ridge, casting gold over the frost-wet grass. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. By the end of August, the days shortened and the air turned dry, cracked, and golden. The fever hadn't come back, and Veta was back to chasing beetles in the garden and tying scraps of calico into her braids. Jessa kept her close, though kept a hand on her back when she climbed too high, kept her in sight when she ventured past the gate. Boone noticed. He didn't press her about it. He just stayed. Most evenings, he returned from the ranch long after the sun had slipped behind the ridge. Sometimes he brought a sack of cornmeal or a bundle of kindling. Sometimes he brought nothing but himself, which, Jessa had learned, was more than enough. One night, as the stars thickened overhead and the crickets fell quiet, Boone leaned his shoulder against the porch post and said, "I met a man today who says there's a parcel of land between here and the foothills. Abandoned, mostly brush and broken fence. He's looking to sell it cheap." Jessa sat in the porch chair, a tin cup cooling in her hand. "You thinking of buying land?" "Might be. If I can get the fence mended before winter and find a decent mule team, I could get winter wheat in by late October." She looked at him, head tilted just slightly. "You planning to settle here?" He rubbed a thumb along the grain of the wood rail. "Depends." "On what?" Boone breathed in slow. "On whether I'd be settling alone." Jessa didn't answer right away. Then she stood, crossed to the edge of the porch and looked out over the dark. "That land, how many acres?" 23, give or take. Water, a creek runs through the back edge, shallow but steady." She nodded once. "You'd need a second set of hands to make it run." "I would." Jessa turned to face him. "You'd need someone who knows how to patch clothes and stop bleeding and keep a child from sticking her hand in a stove." "I would," Boone said again. She stepped closer, so close that the hem of her dress brushed the toe of his boot. "Then maybe you ought to ask properly." He looked her in the eye, quiet and steady. "Jessa Rowan, would you come build a life with me? Raise that girl under a roof we build ourselves. Start something that doesn't scare you to want." Jessa's voice barely rose above the warm night air. "I don't scare easy. I know." She reached up, touched the edge of his collar where it had frayed from wear. "It wouldn't be easy. No. There'd be years where we'd have more work than food. There'd be years we'd have more wheat than time to mill it. And what if I get tired of you?" Boone's mouth tugged, not quite a smile. "You won't." She didn't kiss him, not yet. But her hand stayed on his shirt, fingers curled in the fabric like she meant to hold on. "You'll need to talk to the school teacher. Veda's near reading, and I won't have her falling behind. I'll do it first thing. And don't bring that mule around unless it's sound. I won't have it trampling the cabbage rows. I'll test its gait myself. And you better be ready to build a chicken coop. I'm not raising them in the parlor again." Boone straightened. "You mean to come?" She nodded once. "I do." He reached out, took her hand in his. "Then we'll start next week." Jessa leaned her head against his shoulder. "You already bought it, didn't you, this morning?" She laughed, low and full in her throat. "You're lucky I said yes." Boone turned his face toward hers, not quite touching. "I knew you would." "You left the door open." Inside, Veda's small feet padded across the floorboards as she shifted in her sleep. Outside, two figures stood close beneath the stars, not speaking, not moving. Just steady as the land itself, which waited quietly to be tilled, seeded, and made into something lasting. Boone finished the last hinge on the door before the frost set in. The new cabin stood a quarter-mile from the creek, rough-timbered and square-shouldered, with smoke already curling from the stovepipe and chicken wire stretched taut around the small yard. It wasn't pretty, not yet, but it held against the wind and the roof didn't leak. That was enough. Jessa stood at the edge of the field, hem wet from the grass, watching Veda trail after a hen with one of Boone's old hats pulled low over her ears. The girl had taken to the land as quick as spring followed snow. She'd named every chicken after towns she'd never seen and built a scarecrow that leaned so far right Boone had to brace it with a fence post. But it held, and the birds stayed off the rows. Boone came up behind Jessa, brushing wood shavings from his sleeves. "She fed them twice today." "She's trying to make them like her," Jessa said. "Yesterday she left them cornbread." Boone glanced over. "That why we're short?" "I saved you a piece." He smiled, brushing a curl from her temple. "You always do." She didn't move away. "I was thinking we could put a root cellar in behind the shed. The soil's soft enough." "I'll dig it," he said. "We'll keep the potatoes from freezing. And if we board the coop proper, we might keep the foxes out this winter." Boone nodded. "You're thinking long-term." "I am." He leaned his shoulder against hers. "I was thinking we ought to be married before the snow falls." Jessa didn't answer right away. She watched Veda crouch in the grass, whispering to a hen named Helena. The girl's hair was longer now, tied back with a ribbon Boone had traded a flint striker for at the general store. "You asking me?" "I am." Jessa turned to him. "Where would we find a preacher this far out?" "There's a circuit rider that comes through once a month," he said. "Saw him near the mill road just last week. He remembered my name." She crossed her arms, but her mouth softened. "And you'd marry a woman who can't sew a straight hem and burns the biscuits if she's distracted." "I'd marry the woman who kept a baby alive with nothing but grit," he said. "Who stood her ground in the middle of a street and never begged anyone for a thing." Jessa looked down, then back up. "You'd be marrying Veda too. That doesn't change." Boone crouched to tighten the bootlace slipping free at his ankle. "I figured I already had." She crouched with him, hands brushing the dirt. "You don't ask for much, do you?" "I don't need much," he said. "Just you two and the land under our feet." Veda came running then, arms full of feathers and excitement. "Mama, Mr." Helena laid an egg. Jessa laughed and took the egg from her small hands. "I think Helena might be a missus after all." Boone stood, lifting Veda under one arm. "You think she'd wear her best dress for the wedding? She'll try to wear the scarecrow's hat again. We'll let her." That night, Jessa lit the lamp while Boone finished sanding the last drawer on the cabinet she'd asked for. The cabin smelled of pine and beeswax and the bread she hadn't burned. After Veda was tucked under the quilt with her stuffed rabbit and a story about a horse that could talk, Boone put the kettle on and sat beside Jessa at the table. She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I never thought I'd end up here," Any of it. Boone watched her hands. You regret it, she shook her head. I regret not believing in this sooner. He reached across the table, taking her wrist gently. It's here now. She looked at him, eyes steady. Then yes. I'll marry you before the snow falls. 3 weeks later, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, they stood on the edge of their field with the circuit rider holding a worn book and Veta trying to tie a ribbon around the bride's wrist. Jessa wore a dress with mended seams and boots still damp from the creek. Boone wore the same coat he'd worn when he first walked her home, stitched at the cuff, clean at the collar. They said their vows with the wind tugging at their sleeves and the land quiet around them. After the preacher rode off, Veta led them back to the porch, where a pie cooled and the chickens scratched at the grass. Boone lifted Jessa's hand to his lips. She leaned into him, forehead against his. You think this is what peace feels like? Boone held her close, their daughter dancing barefoot along the porch rail. Feels like home. Years passed. The land held. The wheat came in thick 3 falls in a row. Jessa taught Veta to read by lamplight and Boone taught her to ride by feel. The root cellar filled each autumn. The chicken coop held through every storm. And the house, a little worn at the corners, never leaked. At night, when the wind rolled low over the fields and the fire burned down to its heart, Boone would rest his hand over Jessa's, calloused fingers laced through hers. She never let go. They lived long and well and never alone again.